and your field of choice is now. If we think about it in this way, even in what we call the West, right, not the former Soviet bloc countries and so on, people are a lot less free than they were 100 years ago. Why? In some ways they're freer. We have greater civil liberties. In the 19th century, slavery ended. But there was the other fact, is that 100 years ago, if we could go in a time machine to, let's say, 1911, what you would find is that in virtually all of the European countries in North America, and because Britain controlled such a large empire, which included the Bahamas, so much else of the world, you would find that government didn't do these things that are now taken for granted. They didn't provide pensions. They didn't provide health care. They didn't provide housing. They didn't provide education to a great extent. These were expected to be the things that the individual was responsible for. And that was the definition of a free person. The same way as the slave who had been given his freedom by the master through manumission. Now, freedom has a price. And that price is you now have to make these responsible choices for yourself. But the choice is either others make it for you or you make it for yourself. Now, what are the implications of this? Why is this important? What happens? What are the consequences when the choice controlling authority is taken out of your own hands and is given to others through the political and economic policy arena? That's in fact the theme of virtually all of the lectures that we're going to be doing over the rest of these 2 days. But the fundamental choice behind it all is, shall you be a free and moral deciding individual, or shall you, whether it's technically called slavery or not, become a ward of the state, where the state taxes away the income you've earned, and then it, as if it was a slave master, decides what you will be eligible for and given through its police power to do things to you. Thank you very much. For any question and answers. Okay. Yes?
In your definition of slave,
yes.
You just said pretty much whenever you're a tool, so when one human uses another human pretty much as a tool,
right,
or as a means to an end.
Yes.
You're just saying that, does that mean that slavery is always wrong because we use each other as tools, I mean, even in business, and we restrict each other? I mean, you go to a job, they say you must work from 9 to 5 or else.
Right.
You have limited their freedom.
Right.
That's not necessarily wrong. I'm just saying slavery can be now put into just about everyday life.
Well, I wouldn't call it freedom. I understand what you're saying, but I would say it's free contractual arrangement.
Yeah.
In other words, we are in a free and open society. We are both means and ends. We're an end in ourselves. You decide to go to college, the career, who you're going to marry, where you're going to live. But as we will discuss, particularly in the next lecture, of how the market works, we live in a system of division of labor. One is the butcher, the baker, the candlestick maker, the tailor, and so on. And we acquire most of the things that we want from our fellow men through trade. And in that sense, how do I get what the other person has that I want in the exchange process? I must reciprocate and offer to sell him something that he desires, that he'll take in exchange for what he has that I want. Now, as a consequence of this, I am a means to his end, just as he is a means to my end, as we each pursue our own ends as we define them. But the difference here is that the importance of freedom, another element of the importance of freedom, is not the right to say yes. Anybody can say yes. The importance of freedom is the right to say no. Okay, I go into a store and I say I'm looking for a job, and the guy says, well, I think we have some openings, but these are the hours you'd have to work, and this is the work conditions, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Okay? Now, I have to then evaluate what all of my alternatives are. And I can then decide, do I find it attractive enough to accept the terms that have been offered to me in terms of the income that I could earn to accept the position. But I can say no. Okay? It's the ability to say no. The slave can't say no. Right? The slave can't say to the master, you know, today I'm really not interested in going out in the field. Sorry, you know, it's kind of cloudy, it's a little chilly out. I'm really not in the mood to work in the field today. The slave can't do that. Okay? The individual may have to pay a cost, because nothing comes free in life. But he can choose to quit his job. He can tell the employer, I don't particularly like the work conditions. And then the employer has to decide whether to modify the work conditions because he values the services the employee can give to him, or they don't keep exchanging. There's a difference between the freedom of choice and the option to say no versus the position of a slave who has no alternative either to say yes or no because he only can do what the master says. It's a totally different situation. Let me put it this way. Have you ever gone into any store, like a clothing store or a shoe store, and you're looking around and say, well, those shoes look okay. Yeah, that's not, oh, I don't like that price. And you start walking out, right? We all have decided not to buy something. Did someone stop you at the door and says, where are you going? Well, I looked around, I think I like the shoe. The boss says you can't leave until you buy a pair of shoes. Excuse me? Nah, you ain't leaving until you buy a pair of shoes. Well, they can't do that, right? That would be an abridgment of your freedom. It's illegal. And why is it illegal? Because you have the freedom to choose, right? You can either enter into the exchange or not enter in. I can either pass over the money and get the pair of shoes, or I can choose not to. And it doesn't matter why I don't want the pair of shoes. It's not the right style, not the right fit, not comfortable. The price isn't one I'm willing to pay. It doesn't matter why you don't want to buy the shoes. You don't have to buy the shoes. That's the difference in the marketplace. You're not a slave in the marketplace because there's no compulsion involved. The very notion of slavery is that the slave master has the authority to use physical force or its threat to make you comply with what he wants.
So physical force would be the defining or something that separates slavery from your
correct
marketplace
yes.
regulation. Okay.
Yes, and you're right to highlight and emphasize that. That is crucial. Yes.
So in a free market society or system, how do you view the government's role? Or how would you comment on the government's role in a free market society, knowing that there's no real pure free market?
It seems to me that a conception of government that is consistent with a view of individuals having control of their own life, making their own choices, having personal responsibility in the way I tried to explain it. The role of government in such a society would be narrowly defined to the police, to protect us from violence, fraud, and robbery. Law courts, because obviously if such violations of your life, your property in some way occurs, there should be a criminal way to either prevent it or get some type of restitution, etc. There are then civil disputes. We honestly enter into a contract, but now a dispute arrives about the wording. It isn't necessarily that we mean to cheat each other, but the wording is ambiguous. We go to a court of law to adjudicate the dispute. There's obviously a need for courts for that purposes. And then finally, there can be foreign bandits. Sometimes countries have invaded other countries for one reason or another, and therefore it's legitimate to imagine a country having a national defense. But beyond those functions of police, courts, and national defense, I would say that there are very few other activities that can be legitimized in a free society. That is the role of the government in society.
But in doing all of that, government needs the resources, aka money, right? So they'll have to tax or have some sort of revenue stream in doing that. In your mind, or can you articulate some sort of fair mechanism that governments can use